Hello, this is my presentation for my semester 2 at NUS. This is for class CS 4240, the VR interactions class, and this is my project, the terrain editor. This is in game, or in editor rather. You can't place foliage. This is just to showcase how foliage interacts with the terrain. This is the little setup that I put together. More on that later. And what the terrain editor is it's a tool that can be used to edit terrain real time at runtime. This tool is actually going to be part of a larger program for reimagining a game from the N64 DD and it got ported to the GameCube later. It's called Doshin the Giant. A clip will be shown at the end of the video to showcase what will be in the tool's future, and if you stay for the end, there's a surprise announcement. So what it took to put this project together, oh boy, and there's a good development story behind this. So I worked solo because of COVID-19. I had to go back home. I was originally part of one of the other teams, the chatbot, and it seems like they got their stuff together pretty well. All the coding, therefore, was done by me during my quarantine period. So what did that mean for me? I had to go back and forth with new and old Unity documentation. More on that later. Um, Within the last like 4 or 5 days, I actually switched platforms like 4 times. Um, Oculus VR is something I originally wanted to do. When I got home, I got a refurbished headset. It was broken, I couldn't fix it, and I returned it to the store. So unfortunately, I couldn't do VR, so I switched to AR, which means I had a lot of design changes I had to go through. When I was finally getting ready to port everything over to AR, I really didn't like how it was working out, so I tried AR Foundation first, and I tried Vuforia. Like I said, I didn't like either one, so I switched over to my last resort, Google Cardboard. And because I had everything on mobile, and it was VR mobile, I had to make sure that there was controller support, because otherwise I have like no way to interact, well, nicely. So this is a quick video of what the test build is like. Alright. I don't know why that happened, sorry. So what were the requirements for the system overall, at least after numerous redos? So I want a raise option, a lower option, and a modify values live. So with VR, I combined the width and the height. As you could see in the test build, they were separate. I just put it together because sometimes there's a little bit of sharper edges, as you saw. What were the requirements for it to work with Google Cardboard? This is where it gets interesting. So because my phone is my screen, I have absolutely no controllers or anything really to work with, unless I do gaze input, which I'll get into why that's a problem later. But I need to hook up a controller. So I have a PS4 controller at home. I hook that up through Bluetooth. Button accessible UI. UI is not actually accessible. Everything needs to be in the world space, and even then, it's not guaranteed. So I have to make sure that the UI that I used is accessible by buttons. A headset. I mean, you could do it without a headset. You'll still get that split screen view when you upload your build, but it's gonna be kind of blurry. It'll look kind of weird. A reticle via camera. So one thing to note about this, I bring it up later, but Google Cardboard has a prefab for a reticle, but that's it. You can only put it underneath the main camera, nothing else. And Unity, when you port to more mobile platforms, it doesn't support the use of a secondary joystick, so I kind of didn't want to build a crosshair reticle. It just wouldn't be worth it if I can't use a secondary, so it would have to be stuck to the camera. And I needed a way to input modifiers. I have no Bluetooth keyboard at home, and obviously, during this time period, I can't really go out and just buy something. And I tried to get a UI keyboard together, but it didn't want to work with any buttons, like at all. It worked fine in the editor, but my controller would not budge on it. So challenges faced. Like I said, I worked solo on this. I had like a month, probably a little less, to work on this, and I changed my desired platform within like the last 4 or 5 days, so that definitely did not help. Anything in terms of design choices, yeah, I did that really quickly for the new platform, needless to say. Google Cardboard. I'll give my thoughts on it later, but to give a good example of what's happening in Google Cardboard, there's not that much documentation or examples. It's a dead product, but it is open source now. And if I were to go into the standard asset, I can't use the FPS prefab character controller. And well, what I'm using now is just the rigid body one, but other character controllers just don't really work all the time. Usually I notice that they break when I build the program, so I always have to like replace it and replace all the references. It's a little annoying. Controller support, I added it with Input Manager 1.0. A little bit earlier last year, Unity managed to introduce a new input system. I've worked with it before, but it's a little screwy, and the fact that I couldn't use my secondary joystick, I'd rather just work with what I know. If you want to test out the new one, it's a lot nicer with mapping. The old input manager is a little... that shows its age. Really getting creative with how I implement literally everything. Mainly the UI is what I had the most issue with, but it was fun to see what I can do on such a tight constraint. Terrain editing. I'm actually using obsolete code. It was deprecated in Unity 2019.2. I have that in my documentation. You'll never guess what I use. I use Unity 2019.3. Just figures, right? So terrain editing, I will go over, generally speaking, what I did. I actually kind of hit a wall with this for a good like 2 weeks. Um, so what I do at the start is I grab terrain data so I can use it later. Height map width and height map height. This is what's going to be deprecated later. So if I were to see these height map width and height map height in current versions of Unity, they are now height map resolution, so I might try to update them later for the tool's later life, but in the meantime, I just have it set like this for this project because resolution isn't really specific enough. So I have to play with that a little on my own later. In the update, we want to set up a raycast hit array, and if we continue, if we left click or we use the square face button, we're going to check if there's a raycast hit, and if so, we raise the terrain at that given location. If we right click or use the X button, we do the same thing, except now we just lower terrain. And lower terrain is going to be pretty much the exact same thing, just like swap all the pluses with minuses, but what we do is we set up a mouse X and a mouse Z, and we're going to cast that to an int. We're going to divide the point which we are passing and divide that by the terrain size, checking the axis, and then outside of that we're going to multiply by either the width or the height, depends on what axis you're on. And there's a thing called modified heights, and that's going to store our newly created terrain. So the way that we're doing that is we're subtracting from whatever axis we're on. So say like mouse X, we're subtracting by X base. Mouse Z, we're doing by Z base. And we want to grab the width base and the height base. Now this should cover the entire map. If we wanted to just cover a portion of it, we would just be subtracting in the width and the height area. I don't know, by say like 100 by 100, so we only have like 400 by 400 to work with. My terrain's 500 by 500, so it covers 500 by 500. So what we want to do next is we are going to loop through the Z-axis and the X-axis, and we just want to find the distance in between the 2 points we set up. We can imagine it just like it's just a circular brush. We are going to just find the distance between two, like and when we do that, we are going to set the modified heights and the heights respectively. We go outside the loop, and then we set heights for the terrain data. And like I said, with lower terrain, you just swap everything that's a plus with a minus, whatever else after that. Padlock input. How did I choose this? So, like I said earlier, I had a bit of an issue with the keyboard. Something was made, and very, very last minute I had to change it because it just wouldn't budge with the controller. I'm not really sure why, I'll be honest with you. But thankfully, I'm confident enough with my previous skills in Unity and having enough competitions of programming under my belt where I can make something quick, I can make something reliable enough, but it's just not going to be that pretty. So, Google Camera, wow, Google Cardboard only allows the reticle prefab to be placed under the main camera. I know I brought that up earlier, and I wasn't going to make a second reticle prefab if nothing was going to work. So I found this Padlock asset online because I'm not a modeler. So thankfully it actually came with something to rotate the wheel, so I didn't have to write that. And what that's done by is this action event, and it just keeps updating. It'll tell me what face I'm on and what number I'm on. Everything else, like setting the text and grabbing it and whatnot, that was done by me. So I thought the Padlock idea would work best because it's the easiest thing that I can think of where I can just like flash my reticle or like click a button or something, and I can just grab the value. It's the easiest thing that I can think of, but if there's anything else, I just didn't think of it. Google Cardboard, what my thoughts are on the actual thing itself. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. It's free and it's open source now. It's a very, very simple setup. It's pretty easy to understand the prefabs. Now let's get into the cons, which there's a lot. It's a little too simple to build anything substantial. I'm not going to say complex, I'm going to say substantial. It's a very, very simplistic platform. If you use Google Cardboard, you lose all access to controllers right out of the box. Of course, I set mine up via Bluetooth. I made sure my inputs linked up with everything, but if you don't do that, you don't have any controllers whatsoever, unless you do something like a gaze input. Unless you have Daydream, which is its own platform, it has its own controllers, but I didn't do that. I don't have access to that. There's little to no documentation. The documentation there is just pretty bare bones, I'm not gonna lie. You can follow it, it's simple enough, but it's not good, honestly. there's not that many resources online either. There's only so many people who play with it. So picking this up, while it was easy, you just have to get really creative with whatever you're doing. As you may know, this is a no longer supported platform as of 2019, and the gaze input, I brought it up a couple times, but their prefab sucks, like flat out. I'd rather build my own, and I instead just did a bunch of like pointer enters or just controller button clicks because the gaze input just, it was not good. So you get what you don't pay for. So I'm not gonna give it like I'd give it a 4 out of 10, but it's free and it's open source now, so I'm not gonna yell at it that much. It's a very interesting platform, but if I were to play with it again, I'm only gonna build like an experience or something. I wouldn't really build, definitely not a tool, and maybe not a game. So if you want to get really experimental and just have a very easy access to VR, I would recommend it though. I would recommend it and I'd give it maybe like a 7 out of 10. So, what do we have now? The larger project. So, I'm just gonna give you a quick idea of what this game is. We see this Roblox looking dude here. I'm not gonna just skip through it. It's a game, but it's much more of a life sim. Walk around, yeah, it's really
And even make mountains rise up from the seabed.
Yeah, look, this dude looks like a Roblox character. It bugs me. Originally the project was meant to be a very small-scale recreation of this game, but due to the numerous platform switches and me not having access to a good platform, I decided to only take the main gimmick, which was the terrain editing. This game's also very slow, so you just walk at like a normal pace. What do I want to do from here on out? Obviously implement more into the terrain editing, have an actual character, so I probably have to learn rigging, which is fine. So let's move on. The terrain editor, the big announcement, it's going to be on the asset store hopefully within like a month from now, at least from this video, and it'll be for free because I originally built this for a class. So, what will I include on that? The raise and lower terrain, hopefully I'll fix it and quote unquote modernize it. Sample scenes per supported platform with live inputs. I say this because I want to properly test it on all the platforms that I want to port it on. The Rift, if the shortage ends, I will have a sample scene for the Rift because I actually want one to play with. Future updates for this that I don't have currently, maybe a texture painter, I really want to try that. And if that's the case, probably a decent fade effect. Anything else that I might add, I'm not going to bring up here because I might make a premium version, I'm not sure yet. But this was just a fun little thing I wanted to put together, and as for the relevance of it being in particularly Google Cardboard, you know what, I just wanted to test it, and it works, so I'm happy with that. Thank you guys very much. Feel free to contact me, like and subscribe for more programming content tutorials. There will be a cooler demonstration to be released probably by like tomorrow. Thank you guys so much. Hope you all have a good day.